Hiya folks, welcome to our animation.
We'll be breaking this video down into a few chapters. 1. Animation styles. 2. Workflow. 3. Audio. 4. Commonly asked questions. And 5. Moving forward.
And then time for questions at the end, of which I expect none.
So let's start with a quick overview of animation styles. Here are different examples of how animation has been used throughout history, and hopefully you'll be able to see just how they've influenced things here at Geico. Flipbooks. Flipbooks are a great and well-known way to show us how animation works on a very basic level. Flipbooks are a series of illustrations, or frames, bound together and flipped through rapidly. The images move so quickly that the brain is tricked into assuming it's actually moving. Animation is an illusion, and just like other magic tricks, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than what the audience actually sees. Zoetrope. Perhaps less easy to name, but here the flipbook method is advanced, and we start to see how the actual idea of animated film came into being. A zoetrope works by placing a series of images in order, much like the flipbook. Except, rather than you flipping through the images, you spin the wheel of the machine, and the carefully placed slits on the outside of the machine allow for the viewer to watch the images come to life. Traditional animation. Traditional 2D animation is probably the most well-known style due to Disney films, etc. In the beginning, this type of animation was drawn frame by frame. The difference here is that these frames were then placed into a multiplane camera that literally filmed each frame one by one to create a video of the moving animation. The multiplane camera also allowed backgrounds to move for the first time, like a kind of prehistoric Photoshop. It gave the animators the ability to work in layers that could be moved independently, not just with flat drawings. You can see here, with this example from Disney's Treasure Planet, how skilled animators, colourists, clean-up artists, etc. can take these initial drawings and change them into such a polished, finished piece.
Fun fact, FPS stands for frames per second. The more frames an animation has per second, the smoother the animation. Obviously.
With advancements in technology and the integration of computers into the animation process, there was no need for such bulky equipment, and the desktop turned into a one-stop shop for video creation. The method remains somewhat the same, but computers can help speed up and polish the process. This has given so many artists the chance to develop their own creations which simply wouldn't have been possible before. Stop motion animation. Stop motion is another classical type of animation. The process relies on a series of photographs of real-world objects, not drawn stills. These are put together just as the previous animation types we've looked at, in order to create movement. The objects can be anything, but the standard materials include clay models, characters made from paper shapes, puppets, or even people. Stop motion is a painstaking method. If something goes wrong in a sequence, the entire scene must be made again from scratch. 3D animation. 3D animation has blown up in a big way because it removed the need for all animators to be amazing illustrators, although a lot of skill is still required. 3D animations work completely different from every other method mentioned so far. They work more like virtual puppets than anything else. The process is still a grueling one and extremely demanding on your hardware. This kind of animation is the basis for most of what you see in film today, as CGI is usually a combination of 3D animated models and other film effects. 2D vector animation. This could be seen as the child of both 3D and traditional animation, as it gives the flat 2D-like effect we get from traditional animation, but with some of the same benefits of 3D. Whereas before, the animator would have to create every frame, now we can create the object, give it a point A and a point B, and the computer will fill out everything in between for us. This has transformed the industry, as now everything can be made in half the time, at half the cost, by people half as talented. However, the range of motion is severely limited and characters can appear simplistic and flat. It's handy in that it allows designers to make assets which we can then animate and move easily between us. Most children's shows use this method now due to its efficiency. Motion graphics. Motion graphics is a very specific slice of the animation spectrum, best described as moving graphic design. This area is usually focused on the combination of design elements, music, and motion in order to convey information to the audience. You'll see this most prominently in explainer videos or film intros. Kinetic typography is also very common in this field. Generally speaking, things like character animation, hand-drawn animation, and VFX in film would fall outside of this specialty. The reason we wanted to show you all those different kinds of animations is just so that the whole team can see where our inspiration comes from and possibilities for the future. We like to challenge ourselves creatively, but we're also being challenged on a technical level too. Almost every project will introduce a new problem we simply haven't faced before, and experimentation is needed to solve it. There are so many different software packages for different styles, and we need to keep up with them. Not every animation is built the same way, and sometimes the simplest looking storyboard panel can introduce huge hurdles. Pickles is now going to take you through a very simple animation build to show what I mean.
The humble square. Marvel at its beauty, its simplicity, its equilateralness. And now, we're gonna animate it. Now, I'm not trying to turn you into a bunch of animators, but just wanted to show you the standard kind of process I go through on the daily. Here's my After Effects workstation. I know it looks like an airplane control panel, but I'll just highlight a couple of things. Here's the timeline. You can see the time in seconds on top, so I can tell the assets how to move and when to do it. And the blue bar is the layer our square is on. Let's start by making my square travel to the right and back. So I'll plant a keyframe. A keyframe is like a little instruction in time. This keyframe says, be here at this time. Then I'll put another one here, which tells it to go right. I'll put a third one down, which tells it to return to the same spot. And preview. Now, I would say job well done, pack up boys, it's time to go home. But more likely than not, Jenny will say, I don't hate it, but it needs a little bit more oomph. Well, okay then. I've only keyframed its position, so let's keyframe its rotation. We'll make it spin continuously. That's pretty cool, but let's add another moving aspect, scale. We'll make it almost pulsate to a larger size in the middle of the motion across. I also don't like the almost robotic movement of it as it hits the end. I want it to slow to a stop for a smoother, more natural feel. To do that, I need to ease the keyframes using the graph editor. This is where we can see the motion as a parabolic curve and edit it manually to the exact thing we're after. And trust me, this is a whole fresh hell in of itself right here. But to keep it simple, I'll leave the automatic setting for easy ease. Now let's have a look. That's much better. Sometimes the simplest thing requires the most work. I go through this every single time anything moves in a video. But Derulo still thinks it's a bit pony. He wants it smaller and off to the side. Now I can't just drag it into place because I've already told it where to be at various points. And I'd have to go and amend every single keyframe. So instead, I'll attach it to a null object, which acts like a controller of sorts. Now I can move it while it keeps all of its original instructions as before. See, this is where things get interesting, and by duplicating a fairly simple sequence of movements and altering the layout, you can achieve some pretty cool things. Now everything's attached to a null, and I rotated that. Not enough? Let's duplicate, rotate, and offset the timing of the second batch. But wait! This is all well and good. But what about when Fiona comes in and says, this is all a load of shite pickles, I need 7 squares in a ring, not 8. Well, oh god, that's actually not an easy thing to go back and amend. The spacing between the squares will have to be calculated again. I'll have to detach some of them from the null, but not others while I do that, and well, for a simple amend it actually tears the delicate system of connections apart, and it's best I just start again. This is why sign off at storyboard stage is so critical. It removes this kind of hiccup from happening and could save hours and sometimes days of wasted energy. Things compound further in a 3D space. Here we have a large cube, a small cube, and a cuboid in a space, and I've animated the camera through the scene. But if someone came back and said they wanted to see the cuboid first, then the set needs completely rearranged along with the camera movement. Seems simple here, but imagine how big a job that would be in a 2-minute long unbroken sequence. Another example. I animated this copy in time with the music. The amend I got was to add another word in. This had a small cascade effect. I couldn't simply add a word in like you would on a design. Now I had to account for every other word, the new movements, and retime the sequence with the music and move the rest of the video forward a bit so it was legible. The point is, once things start moving, it's like dance choreography. You remove something, add something, or change something, you could be unknowingly affecting the entire piece, and often serious reconfiguration is required, and that means time. So let's save time by treating the storyboards as gospel.
Audio. This is an often overlooked part of our roles as animators, but sound design and editing is an entire skill set of its own, and it's not something to be treated as a 5-minute job tacked on at the end of a project. Sound recordings we make ourselves have to go through an entire process of refinement and cleanup. On top of that, we often have to edit voiceovers, source and sometimes augment sound effects. And of course, there's choosing the right soundtrack and cutting it to stay in time with the video. Sound design is a profession within itself, and although the team here at Guy & Co are not audio engineers, we try our best to deliver the best sound quality to our clients.
Commonly asked questions. In this section, we want to address some questions which regularly pop up here and there. These tips should prove useful for everyone at the company to know. Question 1. Can I get that video in a story format? So when we talk about story formats, landscape, 16:9s, widescreen, etc., we're really talking about aspect ratios. This refers to the ratio of the width to the height of the image or screen. Here's a screen with an aspect ratio of 4:3. Remember your old TVs had this? Or maybe your current TV, who am I to judge? This is very rarely seen these days unless you're an artsy-fartsy filmmaker. And here's the industry standard 16:9 screen as found on almost everyone's computer monitor or TV. I may often refer to this as landscape, but technically that could mean any aspect ratio that's longer than it is high. If we flip it, it becomes a 9:16, i.e. a portrait format. This is only really ever taken from phone cameras and used in Instagram stories. Another favourite would be the 1:1 aspect ratio, our old friend the square. This is the best shape for posting on social media as it maximises the viewing space when viewed in a feed. Or the grid. There are others, but those are the ones worth knowing. Now that you've seen how animations are built, you can see the problems that can arise from changing the aspect ratio. If I design a video in 16:9, look at how much I lose when I cut it down to a square. I can scan across to show elements of it, but it's pretty janky. Even worse would be if I was asked to change a square into a story, I'd have all this empty black space to fill, so I'd have to blow it up and now it looks, well, shite. If we know ahead of time, we can prepare a storyboard to apply more broadly across the range of formats, but that only helps a little.
So, is this an animatic? There seems to be a little confusion over what an animatic actually is. Animatics are essentially storyboards with music and voiceover to set the pace of the animation to come. None of the elements on the screen should move. The second anything moves, it becomes a rough draft animation. Animatics are great for assessing timing and flow. That's about it. A sample animation is different. That would consist of a small series of examples of how the animation itself would look and move.
Is the render done yet? The short sarky answer would be probably not. To be clear, rendering out an animation is a necessary step for all published videos. It's essentially transforming my project into a video file. And sometimes, it's super intensive. It's also not as simple as hitting a render button. There's a litany of settings and I'm going to go through every single one of them here and now. Heading into Media Encoder, we first have to set up a dynamic link to the After Effects project or Premiere project. Now up here we have the export settings. What you really want to think about is the format, which is a great way of thinking about it for would be now, but later on you actually here consider a codec. You can actually get many codecs that work in an MP4. Codec, same codecs too, at the same time, which you change the sequence, your codecs, frame rate. Basically, there's a lot. It's also a very temperamental process. Sometimes it's quicker than expected, sometimes longer, and sometimes it crashes my computer. Media Encoder can give me an estimate, and that's all I have to go on. This is why I've always pushed for video delivery to be first thing in the AM, just in case we get a render issue and need to run it overnight.
Can I get some subtitles on that? Subtitles are a pain, often because they're treated like an afterthought. To add subtitles, we literally have to type out the entire script into the video and cut it in time with the VO. We also have to edit the box it sits in, which could be following a specific design style. There is a program out there that makes the subtitles for you. It can also be turned on and off on various sites, and it's easier to edit. However, you cannot design them much beyond font size, and to be honest, we simply haven't learned to code it yet.
Does After Effects like Photoshop? This is one for the designers, so listen up. If After Effects was on the pool, she'd be one picky lady. Photoshop's like the cool art student that wears a scarf in summer. For the most part, they're compatible. After Effects recognizes Photoshop layers and blending modes. They also have some animation qualities in common. However, he's a raster program. She's a vector girl, so you know the issues there. Certainly limits what I can do with the assets, and After Effects doesn't register artboards unless I import them individually. It's not a huge deal, but it does slow me down. Try using folders for your panels on one artboard instead of making many. Now, Illustrator is that dorky guy you've officially friend-zoned, but he's reliable and you do have a lot in common. The fact that both are vector programs is a huge help, as those qualities can carry over into After Effects. However, she doesn't understand your obsession with sublayers. If you need to ready a file for animation, every moving part needs its own layer. It's time consuming, I know, but it has to happen at some point. I can extract sublayers in After Effects sometimes, but it also breaks a few things, so it's not worth it in my opinion. Oh, and InDesign? Lol, no one likes that guy.
Does it need to be a GIF? Okay, what's a GIF? It's a file format which stands for Graphical Interchange Format. They were invented in the 80s by a guy, Steve, who was looking for a way to animate images in the smallest file size. In short, GIFs are a series of images that will loop continuously and doesn't require anyone to press play. Due to the way GIFs are compressed, it is near impossible to retain the look and feel of an animation with lots of colours for longer than 7 seconds, and even then, the quality will be drained immensely. This is a looping video, like an MP4. It can be uploaded on several media players and all over social media. This is a GIF. It's small, it's simple, and it can go almost anywhere. If you can post an image somewhere, it's very likely you can post a GIF there too. GIFs are great for adding onto emails, sticking in small ad spaces, or if you're trying to be funny in the company chat. Moving forward. As you saw with Pickles, sometimes a little change to a signed-off animation is not a little change, but then sometimes it is. To make all of our lives easier, I propose we bring in an element of production called picture lock. Within TV and film, you have a stage during post-production where the footage has been cut together in a way that the flow of the story and all on-screen elements are approved and checked off by everyone involved. The footage is then known as locked. Now, this isn't a soft lock in the way that there will be opportunities to go back and change elements. This costs time, money, and resources that most productions just do not have. I suggest Guy & Co having a storyboard lock stage of our production prior to animation could really help the clients understand that what they are signing off is final, and any alterations in the future will need to be paid for and time added on regardless of how small they deem the change. Now, I totally understand that was a bit of a information overload.
For some, more than others.
We'll upload this video to the server, so anyone who missed anything or just wants to hear our lovely voices again can do so at their own leisure.
And until next time,
that's all, folks.